Hi, I'm Pastor Ryan Speakman. This is These Final Days Ministries, and welcome to episode number 40 of our series, The Truth About the Rapture. So that's 40 episodes in now, and that's kind of a landmark, right? Which is appropriate for today, because today we are officially wrapping up our analysis, and this part of our study has been going on for just weeks and weeks, as you know. But our analysis of the first 69 weeks of Daniel's 70 weeks prophecy that's found in Daniel chapter 9, verses 24 through 27. So we still have one more week to look at, and that's going to be a whole other part of our study. But just to get through the first 69 weeks, and there actually is a gap, as we're going to see, between the end of the 69th week and the beginning of the 70th week. And as we will see, we're going to really prove this out. That gap has indeed lasted for about 2,000 years and counting. So we'll get to that point. But in the meantime, so the first 69 weeks, so we're talking about weeks of years here. So that's 7 years times 69. That's 483 years. And we're talking about prophetic years of 360 days each. So that comes to exactly 173,880 days. So yes, we're being extremely precise here because it's fun and because we can do it, and because God's word really is that precise, even when it comes to things like prophecy. So this prophecy began on the first day of the Hebrew month of Nisan in the Gregorian year 446 BC, and counting forward from that, we initially landed on the Hebrew month and day of Nisan 25. In the Gregorian year AD 31, that's the year that Jesus was crucified. So I mean, obviously we hit the right year. That's a very critically important year, needless to say, and that's actually referenced in the prophecy when Jesus was crucified. Now this was a problem though, because Jesus was actually crucified on Nisan 14 in that year, and again, we originally found ourselves at Nisan 25, which is a couple of weeks later, give or take. And it doesn't work, because according to the prophecy, the 69th week has to end before the crucifixion takes place. So in order to fix this, we applied a simple little trick that is permissible on the Hebrew calendar, which is to decide that this year, AD 31, was a leap year, which on the Hebrew calendar means that we add an additional month, and the additional month is actually added right before the month of Nisan. So that month is the Hebrew month of Adar, and Adar ends up being 2 months, Adar 1 and Adar 2, or in the Hebrew, Adar Aleph and Adar Beit. So that actually solved our problem, because then that put our landing date at Adar 25. We've decided, if I can use that word, or discovered, let's use that, that's a better word, that our event that we're looking for, that is called in the prophecy Messiah the Prince. That was when Jesus kind of officially became Messiah. That was the Mount of Transfiguration event. So, we can kind of leave it there. I mean, on the 19-year Metonic cycle that defines the Hebrew calendar, in that 19-year period, 7 of those years are always going to be leap years. So we really have a better than 1 in 3 chance of being correct that this was a leap year. And, that's good enough. Hypothetically, we could leave it at that. But just for fun, we're going to look at some biblical evidence that, in fact, we're right about this, that year was, in fact, a leap year. Okay, so that's how we're going to end this part of our study. Just kind of a little side note. But if we can get, supporting biblical evidence for any piece of this puzzle, which, as we know by now, has become very, very, complex, sophisticated, whatever you want to call it, anything we can use to substantiate our analysis, what we've arrived at, certainly doesn't hurt. It helps. So let's take a look at this. Let's see how we can kind of prove, or at least support the idea that this was a leap year. So looking at the biblical account of the last month or so of Jesus's ministry before he went to Jerusalem and was crucified, we again have discovered that exactly 2 weeks before his triumphal entry into Jerusalem, which was just a few days before he was crucified, the Mount of Transfiguration event took place. Now, a week or two, probably 2 weeks, let's say 2 weeks, before the Mount of Transfiguration event, And this is another one of those areas where the Bible doesn't actually tell us time periods, but if you go and you read the Gospels and you look at this event that we're about to read, and then read forward to the Mount of Transfiguration event, you're not going to get the impression that any substantial amount of time has passed. Maybe a matter of days, maybe a week. Again, we're gonna go ahead and be liberal here and pad it. We'll say 2 weeks before the Transfiguration event. So we all know the story of the fish and the loaves, that miracle, and just after that miracle, when Jesus fed the 5,000 men plus women and children, so maybe 12,000 people altogether is a good guess, with just a few loaves or a couple of loaves of bread and a few fish. After that miracle, the Bible tells us in Mark chapter 6 is one place that you could read about this, that Jesus sent his disciples in a boat to a town called Bethsaida. Now, Bethsaida is on the northern tip of the Sea of Galilee, which you won't see on this map. It's not marked on this particular map. This is a modern map. But what you'll notice, you see the Sea of Galilee there, right? That big body of water kind of on the right side of the map there. And about 20 miles to the southwest of that is Mount Tabor, where the Mount of Transfiguration event took place. And on the map, that's kind of right in the middle of the map, kind of a dark green, prominent teardrop-shaped mountain there. And on the map, it's labeled Shibli, which is the modern Arabic name for that mountain. But that's Mount Tabor is what the Jews call it. And that is where the Mount of Transfiguration event took place. So again, it's only about 20 miles from the Sea of Galilee. So here in this story, we're on the Sea of Galilee. The disciples are in a boat. They're on their way to Bethsaida on the northern shore. And then we read in Matthew chapter 14, verses 22 through 33, immediately Jesus made his disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side while he sent the multitudes away. So the multitudes here are the thousands that he had fed, or actually the disciples had fed, if we want to get technical, with the fish and the loaves via a miracle that God had performed for them. Verse 23, and when Jesus had sent the multitudes away, he went up on the mountain. Now this isn't the Mount of Transfiguration. This isn't Mount Tabor. This is probably some hill that's right next to the Sea of Galilee, by himself to pray. Now when evening came, he was alone there, but the boat was now in the middle of the sea, tossed by the waves, for the wind was contrary. Now in the fourth watch of the night, which would have been 3 o'clock in the morning, Jesus went to them walking on the sea. And when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were troubled, saying, it is a ghost, and they cried out for fear. So kind of a silly reaction for the disciples to have. I mean, we may have had the same reaction, but it's kind of funny to read that. But what does this tell us? That the disciples are already kind of freaked out. They're already scared. And why would they be already scared before they even see Jesus? It's because of the storm. This is a very, very fierce storm on the Sea of Galilee. Verse 27, but immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, be of good cheer. It is I, do not be afraid. And Peter answered him and said, Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water. So this should be a familiar story, right? I think we all know this story too. Verse 29, so Jesus said, come. And when Peter had come down out of the boat, he walked on the water to go to Jesus. But when he saw that the wind was boisterous, he was afraid and began to sink and cried out, saying, Lord, save me. And immediately Jesus stretched out his hand and caught him and said to him, O you of little faith, why did you doubt? And when they got into the boat, the wind ceased. Then those who were in the boat came and worshipped him, saying, truly you are the Son of God. So Jesus brings them relief from this terrible storm that they've encountered on the Sea of Galilee. So here's what's interesting about this. So I think most of us know that the disciples, the 12 disciples that Jesus chose, about half of these guys were experienced fishermen, and not only that, but Peter, who is maybe one of the most famous among all the disciples. He wasn't just a fisherman, but he actually owned a couple of fishing boats. So he had a couple of crews working for him. So these guys knew the sea, they knew conditions, they knew this lake, the Sea of Galilee. This is where they had worked for who knows how many years. But we get the impression here that these guys are caught off guard by this storm. That it really freaks them out, if I could use that term, scares them. They're surprised by how boisterous it is what the word says here, how severe the storm is. So we at least get the impression here that this is an unusually harsh storm. The disciples are not expecting it, and these guys are, again, experienced seamen, but it frightens them. That's how severe the storm is. So what does this maybe suggest to us? That again, they knew the time of the year. This storm, or at least the severity of it, was apparently unexpected. So this suggests to us that this was an unusually wet year. Maybe we could even say that winter was lasting longer than usual. This should be ringing a bell from previous episodes. So let's look again. What are our 5 criteria that the rabbis in these days use to determine whether or not to declare a particular year a leap year? So here's what they would look at. So Passover, which again would have been scheduled to take place really right at this time if they had not declared it a leap year. But because they did that year, it was postponed by a month. But here's what the criteria are. Again, we've looked at these before. Number 1, was the barley ripe? Number 2, had the fruit crops grown properly? Number 3, had the winter rains stopped? So you see that reference there to winter rain. Number 4, were the roads for Passover pilgrims sufficiently dry to allow passage? And number 5, had the young pigeons matured enough to fly? Okay, so, and if you remember from previous episodes where we discussed this, the rabbis at that time, they would look at these 5 criteria and really what are these 5, what do they have in common? What are they measuring? They're measuring the severity of winter that year. Was winter harsher than normal? Was it seemingly lasting longer than normal? And if so, what their concern is that Passover, this is one of the 3 major feast weeks, high Sabbaths or high holy days, ordained, declared by God Himself in Leviticus chapter 16. This is one of the 3, and it's a very important holiday. Pesach is the Hebrew word for Passover. And what the command was, the mitzvah, is that every Jewish man throughout Israel had to make a pilgrimage, and maybe bring his family too, if he could, make a pilgrimage to Jerusalem, to the temple, to celebrate Passover there. So this would be problematic if winter was lasting longer than normal, stronger rains, heavier rains. The roads aren't clear, people getting stuck in the mud. So to fix this, to allow Passover conditions to be such that the pilgrims could make their way to the holy city, the rabbis would very simply, and they would all it would have to be is just 2 or more of these criteria. So if just 2 of these 5 were not met, then what they would do, the rabbis would add what's called an intercalary month. So they add a whole other month. So their concept of a leap year is very different than on the Gregorian calendar. For us, a leap year is we add 1 day to the end of the month of February. On the Hebrew calendar, they're adding an entire month to fix this. And what they would do then is they would take the month of Adar, and again, they would split that into 2 months, Adar 1 and Adar 2, or in the Hebrew, Adar Aleph and Adar Beit. The month of Adar would actually become Adar Beit, the 2nd month. And then what this would have the effect of accomplishing is that then, of course, the month that follows Adar, which is Nisan, which is when Passover takes place, this would be postponed by a full 30 days. So, and again, this would allow the pilgrims to make their way to Jerusalem without being, too hindered by bad weather. So this fits perfectly. Again, it's just a nice little way to end this part of our study. It's a good way to support our conclusion that this was, in fact, a leap year, just like we need it to be in order for our model to work perfectly. And we want that. I mean, if we can achieve, perfection with our analysis, why not, right? Let's do it. So what does this do? This places our Mount of Transfiguration event, which again probably took place maybe 2 weeks at the most after this event on the Sea of Galilee. This puts this event that in the prophecy, Daniel's prophecy, the 70 weeks prophecy, is referred to as Messiah the Prince, puts the Mount of Transfiguration event on Adar Beit 25, 2 weeks later to the day, 14 days later, Jesus makes his triumphal entry. A few days after that, on Nisan 14, he's crucified, which is referenced in Daniel chapter 9, verse 26. So it's the 3rd verse of that 4-verse prophecy. So that's it. We did it. We're done again with the first 69 weeks of the 70 weeks prophecy. And there's actually a lot of work left to do in this prophecy, because that last week, as I've touched on briefly, in fact describes a 7-year period that we refer to in Christian prophecy as the Great Tribulation period. So So we know that that's a future event, although there's a lot of debate about that. In fact, you may not know this, but most Christians throughout the world today have the view that there is no future 7-year Great Tribulation. So this is something that we really need to address. It's proven to be very challenging to prove, but I think you're going to be amazed at what I've discovered, what I'm able to show you. So come back next episode. We'll pick up there again. We're going to look at the interim period between the 69th week and the 70th week, and then take our analysis forward from there. So hope you're enjoying this. I sure am. You can probably tell I love this stuff. I just want to give you the same advice I always do. Please stay rooted and grounded in the truth of God's word. It's an ongoing effort. We don't learn all this stuff overnight. This is a lifetime effort to dig in and study and learn, and I'm enjoying doing this with you. And also, as I always say, please always stay filled with the Holy Spirit. That's where we get the true revelation and insight about what all this means and what it means to us in our future. So God bless you guys, and I will see you next episode.
Ryan's new book, These Final Days, Part 1. The Truth About the Rapture, the Four Horsemen, and the Prelude to the Great Tribulation is the first in a series that will revolutionize your understanding of what the Bible really says about these final days. Don't miss this groundbreaking book. Get it now at Amazon or at thesefinaldays.org. Also available on Kindle and iBooks.